Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs in Wargames on TNT.
The movie just kind of peters out there at the end, doesn't it? Because Superfly is lonely. He lets him go. Charlie Sheen dies in a playground. And we never do find out what happens to Patrick Swayze. And we get that weird voiceover at the end by the girl. Isn't that the first time we've had voiceover in the whole movie? It wasn't like she started out narrating the movie and now she's wrapping it all up. It's more like, whoa, you mean she was telling this story? You know, anyhow, I'm Joe Bob Briggs, and we've got another America Against the Ruskies flick tonight, Wargames. And Colonel David Hackworth has agreed to stay here with us for that movie, too. And I meant to ask you this. We haven't talked about gays in the military, but can gay guys shoot straight, so to speak?
I think that probably 1 out of 10 soldiers is gay. You notice in the picture, the famous picture of George Washington going across the Delaware and the guy leaning against his knee? Oh, come on. Yeah. So we've had gays in the military forever. What the problem is, it's the mindset of the warrior. And the warrior is the 18-year-old that doesn't have better sense whether to live and die and be a grunt anyway. And his mindset is, and it's got to have that mindset, that he wears golden armor, that he's bulletproof, that there's no bullet with his name on it. And you take that away and you say, introduce gays, and the macho thing leaves, and he says, hey, wait a minute, I'm vulnerable, I can go down.
You're saying gays aren't macho, or if you have a gay next to you, you don't feel as macho?
Yeah, it removes the macho thing from, it's a mindset. It was just like
It's like they need to all be macho together.
Exactly.
Okay, well, the original reason I always heard for keeping them out is that they could be blackmailed, but not anymore, really, because they're proud of being gay. And the only reason they could be blackmailed is that you could say, do what I'm going to do, what I want you to do, or I'm going to tell your drill sergeant. Right?
Yeah, and today, when the President of the United States gives communist China all our missile technology, we don't have to worry about blackmail anymore.
Did he do that?
He sure did.
Okay, well, Wargames is next. But first, let me remind you that next week is Acne Night, where I'll be lecturing on the importance of good nutrition to facial hygiene with the help of dermatologist Vale Reese while we watch the classic Motel Hell and Return of the Living Dead 2. And now, our second feature, Wargames, with Matthew Broderick as the underachiever who hacks into the U.S. defense system and almost causes, you got it, World War III. And no one will believe him when he tells them it was just a game, so he has to go on the run with Ali Sheedy and hotwire payphones and watch dinosaur home movies and stop the Russians from nuking us to smithereens so he can learn to swim. Let's do the drive-in totals. No dead bodies, no breaths. Don't ask me who decided to show it here. 1 motor vehicle collision, 1 helicopter chase, big screen war graphics, Southern-style corn buttering, computer foo, tic-tac-toe foo, global thermonuclear war foo, 3.5 stars. Check it out, and me and Hack will be here to guide you through it.
Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs in Wargames on TNT.
That was Michael Madsen making his feature film debut in that opening scene where the other guy won't press the button. Turn your key, sir. You know, Michael Madsen was Mr. Blonde in Reservoir Dogs and Susan Sarandon's boyfriend in Thelma and Louise, name a couple of his more important roles. So, Hack, is that kind of how it works as far as you know in that room where they keep the nukes and you have the 2 guys with guns and they're both supposed to turn the keys? Is that authentic?
I think it is. And I found it probably not real, the guy going to draw a pistol on him and say shoot, so he shoots him because he won't follow orders. He won't be able to turn both keys at the same time. I had a case where I told a helicopter driver to land, and it was a very bad situation in Vietnam, and the driver didn't want to land. It was a hot landing zone, and I was out of commo, and I had to get in on the ground. The pilot didn't want to land, so I just whipped my pistol out, laid up against his head, and said, land. And I thought later, what if he just said, screw you, Jack, I'm not going to do it. What am I going to do, shoot him?
Right.
So I think it was that same kind of...
Did he land, though?
He landed.
I'd land.
Nothing like cold steel there to get your attention.
Right. Well, they tried to be very authentic in this movie. They even had a couple of those big video machines sent to Matthew Broderick's house so he could practice for the arcade scenes. But they didn't teach him to type. So he had to fake that on the computer. But this is one of those rare quality movies for us here at Monstervision, so I won't hold it up any farther. Roll the film. They've got a great supporting cast for this flick. Barry Corbin who plays the general. He makes a career out of playing Southerners, Urban Cowboy, Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, The Big Easy, Northern Exposure, where he was a Southerner living in Alaska. But the real general, in charge of the real NORAD at the time that this movie came out, didn't really like the casting of Barry Corbin in that part. He said he was slovenly, he was 50 pounds overweight, which he always is. He was 50 IQ points under smart. And he said, and his direct quote was, he said, maybe he'd make lieutenant, but never general. What do you think about that?
Well, I thought that he was more modeled after the Kurt LeMay character, the famous guy in the Air Force that smokes a cigar and so on. So to me, he tracked very well. I'm sure he probably modeled himself after LeMay.
Yeah.
So it worked.
What would I make it to?
Well, you'd make a great 3 or 4 star general. So you're such a diplomat.
You can stay for the whole movie.
Well, it's that time again, isn't it? Time for all the cyber people to assemble in Joe Bob's rec room and basically act like 47 rhesus monkeys all trying to speak at the same time. We do have a cyber boss in there, but he's about as effective as a wino working guard duty at the package store. If you're going to go in there, I would advise you to wear a helmet and a cup. Good luck. TNT.Turner.com/Monstervision. It's a group grope.
Come meet all the Monstervision fans in our chat room at TNT.Turner.com/Monstervision. Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs and Wargames on TNT.
Back in 1983, I was fortunate enough to be at the very first screening of Wargames at the Cannes Film Festival, and the general consensus was it was going to be a runaway hit. Great crowd-pleasing movie. And it didn't really work out that way. It was popular, but it was not really a blockbuster. And when we show it on TNT, the ratings on it are just okay. They're good, but they're not great. So even though normally anything you show about global thermonuclear war goes off the popularity scale. So why is that, Colonel? Why do we love the idea of nuclear war so much?
I think it's the end. It's the destruction of humankind, and we probably have some kind of fascination with that. Man has been frightened from the beginning of the beast gobbling him up. Well, hey, this is the ultimate beast.
Okay. Well, we'll have time to talk about the movie more, but I want to ask you something about when you were a kid. You were born in Santa Monica, California, is that right? And you were 10 or so when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Yep.
What happened in L.A. there?
Well, it was quite incredible. I came out of the Dome Theater in Ocean Park, and war was announced, and I grabbed a bundle of papers and started selling them. And before you know it, there was blackouts, and Japanese were going to invade, and there were soldiers on the beach, and barbed wire on the beach, and searchlights up in the sky, and anti-aircraft guns slamming away. And my little peaceful hometown went from laid-back Santa Monica to a city under siege. And most of it was caused by our own heads. There were no Japanese planes up there, but the guys that were manning the anti-aircraft guns sure thought they were. And the guys flipping up the searchlights sure thought they were.
But that's what made you want to go to war?
Oh, I came from a family that lobbed into America in 1622 and got involved in every war from Virginia to California, so I came from that kind of a background, and I felt that the Japanese were trying to invade my hometown, and I wanted to kill a Jap for Mommy. So I was eager to get in there.
So you lied about your age and got involved in the war?
At 14, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
They didn't ask questions. If you could pick up the rifle, that was all they wanted to know.
All right, well, let's see if Matthew Broderick has found that password yet as we return to Wargames. In 1983, what Matthew Broderick is doing in this movie was considered cute, hacking into the computer. Today, it would be considered a felony. Not because he might start a nuclear war, but because he might tear up somebody's hard drive.
Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs and Wargames on TNT.
It's Defcon 3 at the Crystal Palace, and the ICBMs are warmed up and ready to fly. Do I sound like I know what I'm talking about?
Sound good to me.
What is an ICBM exactly?
Intercontinental ballistic missile. It's a thing that can go 10,000 miles and has the accuracy that it can hit a refrigerator.
Really? And you commanded these missiles?
I commanded the smaller ones, so infantry ones called Davy Crockett. Frontline ones we had in Germany. If we'd have fired them, we would have blinded everybody in our battle group, and it told me how stupid the military was when they gave us this and said, you can't fire it until the general says you can fire it, and the corporal down there is being overrun by Soviet tanks. He's going to wait for the general?
Well, today, how many of these babies do we have warmed up and ready to go?
About 3,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles, but at the high point, when this film was made, I think America had about 25,000, and the Soviets had about the same number. We had enough to melt planet Earth 100 times and convert it into a little ping pong ball that would be charcoal black.
Wow. Are any of our missiles aimed at Pakistan or India?
No, but they got it. I wonder where their missiles are aimed.
Right. You've said that your favorite medal is the Purple Heart, because they can't be faked, right? How do you fake the other medals?
Well, I give you a medal, and then in 3 or 4 months down the track, you write me up for a medal, and we scratch each other's back. And so guys like Alexander Haig would write a medal up for his general, General Allman. Then General Allman gave Alexander Haig a Silver Star medal for retrieving his shaving kit up in North Korea during the war.
Yeah, well...
So that's how it's played.
So
when you see a general with a medal, even a colonel, be dubious. If you see a corporal with a medal, salute him.
Really? It was a really great shaving kit, though.
Sure was. Worth a Silver Star.
You know who turned down the Matthew Broderick role in this movie? Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner was 28 at the time, which seems kind of old for a high school kid, but he decided to do The Big Chill instead. He played the dead guy in The Big Chill, and then they cut his part completely out of that movie, but he's probably over it by now, so let's get back to it. Roll the film. Listen to what the TV news is saying when Matthew Broderick walks in the house. They're talking about a prophylactic recycling center. I guess that's a little joke on the part of the filmmakers, although you could probably save money. I'd save 50 cents a month.
Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs and War Games on TNT.
Nabbed by the FBI while purchasing a Big Gulp. What could be more humiliating? David Hackworth is still with us, retired colonel, author, journalist. You think a high school student could tap into our missile warning system?
They're doing it. Just the other day, a couple kids from California, 15 and 16 years old, cracked right through the Pentagon, got a lot of very vital information. So that's one of the frightening things to me in this new age, how we're so vulnerable.
Could the United States ever accidentally be thrown into a war?
Well, we came about 18 times during this period, especially when Reagan was president, of being within 3 minutes of a nuclear war. The closest one was when a guy in the Pentagon put in a war game, a video war game, and the general came in, pressed the button, and looked up and saw all these missiles incoming and thought it was for real rather than a tape. And some corporal came up and said, "No, General, click." But by that time, we were on Defcon 4. All the missiles were ready to go. Airplanes were dispatched.
Well, see, what apparently inspired this movie was that in November of '79 and twice in June of '80, maybe this is the same thing you're talking about, they had computer malfunctions at NORAD, and it did signal that the U.S. was under attack by Soviet missiles and American forces were put on alert, but they figured it out within about 60 seconds or so. But that's, of course, that's when you were in Australia resting up, so you could come back here and kick Heine, right? You've been a critic of the military.
At that point in time, I was involved in and eventually leading the anti-nuclear movement in Australia for this very reason. The more I got into it, and first of all, what bothered me was Ronald Reagan and the evil empire and all of that, frothing at the mouth of how we could use nuclear weapons, and yes, we could lose 40 million people, but it would be like losing a leg, no big thing, or like stepping on an anthill heel was another one of his expressions, and I thought, wow, how did this guy from a B-grade movie become the man with his finger on the button? And I decided at that time to sound off and try to wake up Australia and maybe more of the world.
Wow. He said we could lose 40 million, no problem?
It wouldn't be a big thing.
Okay, well...
He wouldn't remember that right now.
No, he wouldn't. Let's see if we can get to Defcon 3. Roll it. Did you eat Vegemite when you lived in Australia?
I love Vegemite.
Oh, my God. I think that stuff is vile. It's like spreading stale evaporated beer on a piece of toast.
You only had it once.
Yes.
No, you got to try it twice.
People say to me, Joe Bob, where can I download? I don't want to hear about that. Ask your mother about that. But if you want to find out about the Monstervision schedule or read some of the weirdest mail I've gotten since my ex-wife sent me a cherry bomb Valentine, or just ogle the Playmate of the Week, then write this down, tnt.turner.com/Monstervision. 24 hours a day, you can waste time there and download all you want.
Visit the Monstervision website at tnt.turner.com/Monstervision. Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs and Wargames on TNT.
Now, does anybody besides me think that it's weird that the FBI captures a computer hacker who's monkeying around with the nuclear missile system, and the first thing they do is they take him inside NORAD to look at the system, and then the next thing they do is they leave him alone in a room with a computer so he can log onto the computer again? What do you say, Hack? Are the civilian tech guys that stupid?
Nothing would surprise me, and they had to introduce this guy into NORAD, so I guess they violated a few rules to get him in there.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're at Defcon 3. The computer doesn't know if it's a game or if it's real because it doesn't know the difference, and Dabney Coleman, who plays McKittrick, is good at intimidation techniques like staring at kids while the phone rings, you know. And David Lightman, that's Matthew Broderick, is quite mechanically inclined, okay? That's the setup for this. Roll it. Do you have any kids?
Yeah, 4.
4 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Do they call you Colonel?
They call me when they want money.
Really? Did they ever talk back to you?
Oh, I was away so much that with my sons it was always a little bit of a rebellion thing, that they felt they were in charge, and I'd come back and say, "Hey man, I'm the man here." So,
you didn't end up breeding any war protesters, did you?
Well, neither of my boys have been anxious to join the military, and I'm happy that they didn't.
But I thought that's breaking a tradition going back to 1624.
Oh, well, but we were never regular. I was the only regular soldier. We were just wartime guys. So I think they would enlist if our country were in peril, but thank goodness they don't have to.
Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs and Wargames on TNT.
It's Defcon 3, and there's a group of tourists in the war room. Is there a chance that would happen?
Nope. I'm afraid not.
I like that readout on the Whopper that nobody notices, the one that says it's playing a game. Yeah.
It was the only way they were going to get him out of there. I guess that was the vehicle they used.
Right. I haven't mentioned the director, John Badham. I want to talk about him. Martin Brest was the original director, but they fired him after 3 weeks of shooting because MGM thought his scenes didn't have enough energy. And this is a very energetic movie, so they brought in John Badham, who had scored in the 70s with Saturday Night Fever, and then he had a box office disaster with that Richard Dreyfuss in Whose Life Is It Anyway? They couldn't figure out why that movie didn't do better. You know, such an action-packed story about a guy who slowly dies in a hospital bed while begging everybody to unplug his life support. So, anyhow, about 5 minutes after Badham finished shooting the helicopter action flick Blue Thunder, he was called in on Wargames. He brought back the original writers, they brought back the original story, and MGM had a big hit. And I assume you're liking Wargames a little better than Red Dawn.
Oh, because it almost happened.
Yeah, okay, let's go. Back to the movie. There is one thing worse than watching Richard Dreyfuss die for 2 solid hours, and that's watching Mary Tyler Moore die for 2 solid hours in the Broadway stage version of Whose Life Is It Anyway? Whoa!
Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs and War Games on TNT.
14 hours till the world blows up, and Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy are sitting around watching dinosaur movies. Falcon says that humans are going to destroy themselves like the dinosaurs were destroyed, and the only thing left will be the beeves. What are beeves? Doesn't that mean cows? Like bevo? Do you know?
I don't.
Is a beeve a cow? I thought maybe they had beeves in Australia or in Montana. Isn't that where you live now, Montana?
Yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on a farm?
Well, out in the country.
You still have ducks?
Nope. A lot of ducks down there on the lake.
What's the last big story you covered?
Oh, I guess would have been what was going on in Bosnia. I went over there a number of times. I started my military career really not far from there. It's ironic that 53 years later we're doing the same thing. My regiment went into Trieste, which is northern Italy, but borders on Yugoslavia, for a couple months, and we spent 9 years there. So it was a
Wow.
big quagmire. So I guess it was that. It was incredible, the futility of going back 53 years and seeing us do the same thing all over again.
Yeah? What'd you think about that guy, that fighter pilot that got shot down over Bosnia, that became an American hero?
Oh, I thought he was a big joke. He violated every principle going, getting himself shot down, and then he lived on worms for 6 days, and we make him another Audie Murphy. It tells you where the Air Force is coming from and where a lot of Americans are coming from.
I thought we should have honored the poorly trained Bosnian soldier who was able to shoot down the most sophisticated aircraft in the world. You know, oh, he fell. He's down.
No, well, I think that was why we made all the smoke and mirrors happen with this young captain.
Yeah, well, we're getting close to the end of the movie, so let's get back to it. We haven't talked, I also wanted to mention Dabney Coleman, because Dabney Coleman was pretty hot when War Games came out. He was still coasting off of 9 to 5 and Tootsie, and he always seemed to get typecast as the abusive boss. But he's in that new Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan movie that's coming out in a couple of months, You've Got Mail, and he's playing a role that's a real stretch for him, the abusive boss. So.
Back to Monstervision host Professor Joe Bob Briggs and War Games on TNT.
Now, can somebody tell me why these kids and this guy Falcon don't just pick up a phone and call this NORAD place? They have to helicopter in from the Oregon coast all the way to the Rockies to tell them it's just a game? You know, I don't know anything about helicopters, but can you even fly them that far that quick? Anyway, can you?
Nope.
I didn't think so. Maybe when it's Defcon 1, the lines are tied up or something. But how many times a year do you think we're above Defcon 5?
Well, during that period, I think a hell of a number of times. But now the missiles are all pointed at the ocean and not at targets, except for the Chinese missiles pointed at U.S. cities.
Still?
Yeah. Clinton was supposed to have come to an agreement with them, and maybe they're not on target now. But we live in a very dangerous time now.
How do we know where they're pointed?
Yeah, well,
do we know that?
Yeah. Well, we have agreements with them, and we have inspectors that are verifying that those agreements are happening. So that's how we know.
I see. What would you tell Clinton about the American military right now if you could talk to him mano a mano?
I tell him it's in a very sick shape, and what he needs is advisors that are not politically correct, but tough, romping, stomping people that are going to get our military in shape, that we're spending $300 billion a year, and we could have a far more effective military for $150 billion a year. And we are in a bad position because of many, many reasons, mainly being overstretched, overextended, doing jobs that have nothing to do with national security. We should get involved in defending America, not being the policeman of the world.
All right, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
All right, well, I know you've probably got to be up at 0500 or something to kick some heinies, so we'll let you get going. But, Hack, thanks for being here. I enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Yeah, I did too.
Okay, let's see if Matthew Broderick is going to stop World War III in the conclusion of War Games. Go. And maybe you and me can go down to the firing range sometime for a little... Are you a good shot? You got to be, right?
Good with a grenade.
Good with a grenade. We could go down for some Texan target practice, you know. You get to take your pick on what shaped targets you want. We've got human beings, wild game, or we have this giant black silhouette of Barbra Streisand and James Brolin French kissing. It's very popular.